In Ukraine, a far-right militia known as the Azov Battalion is holding summer camps for kids.
Тут не как в других лагерях.
Тобто ми пропагандуємо здоровий образ життя, заняття спортом, у нас майже всі спортсмени. Тобто дітей, яких в табори відправляють там, де їх просто веселять, то в нас вже трошки інше направлення.
This is the future of Ukraine, of our nation. So we teaching children to love Ukraine.
Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україно! Україно! Помолитися!
Welkom bij deel 3 van mijn videoserie waarin ik mijn visie op het slepende conflict dat zich afspeelt in de Oekraïne met jullie deel. We zagen zojuist een verslag van een jeugdbeweging die gezellig aan het oefenen zijn in de bossen net buiten Kiev. Alleen wil ik er even bij vermelden dat deze jeugd onderdeel uitmaakt van een tak van de Azov-bataljon. Deze Azov-beweging is een openlijk fascistische groepering en maakt hier geen geheim van. Ze haten de Russen intens die in het oosten van de Oekraïne wonen. Dit zal uiteindelijk na de Maidan-coup van 2014 ontsporen in een burgeroorlog, waarbij de bevolking van de Donbass het zwaar te verduren krijgt. Meer daarover komt later aan bod, verderop in deze video. Deze Azov-brigade adoreert Stefan Bandera, een ultranationalist, dus een fascist, die hulde met de Duitsers gedurende de Tweede Wereldoorlog. Maar we gaan even terug naar de Maidan-revolutie. Wie waren ook alweer de speerhoofden die de revolutie doordrukten?
In 2013, Ukrainians rose up against the authoritarian pro-Russian government. Protesters gathered at the Maidan Square in Kiev and deadly clashes broke out. By February 2014, the revolution was successful. A month later, Russian-backed separatists ignited a war in the east. Many of the protesters who fought on the Maidan formed armed militias to battle the separatists. One of the most effective was a small far-right group, the Azov Battalion.
Приймав участь у прямих бойових зіткненнях з ворогом. Потім це став полк. Полк, який отримав свою техніку, артилерію і так далі. І згодом це вже переросло в такий рух в Україні. Зараз це вже політична партія.
De snelheid waarmee fascistische bendes tekeer gingen in Oekraïne bracht Moskou ertoe zich ernstig zorgen te maken over de implicaties van zijn strategisch vitale marinehaven op de Krim, Sebastopol, de thuisbasis van de Russische Zwarte Zeevloot. De bezorgdheid van Rusland werd alleen maar groter toen op 1 maart 2014 3 voormalige Oekraïense presidenten, Kravchuk, Kuchma en Yushchenko, de staatsgreepregering opriepen om de Kharkov-overeenkomsten, waaronder de pachtovereenkomst van Sebastopol, was verlengd van 2014 tot 2042 op te zeggen. 4 dagen later kondigde het secretariaat van het parlement in Kiev een ontwerp aan in een wetgeving waarin toetreding tot de NAVO tot nationale doelstelling werd verheven. En voor wie de boodschap nog niet duidelijk was, kwam coup-president Tjornikov met een verklaring dat Oekraïne overwoog zijn neutrale status te wijzigen. Het vooruitzicht dat de NAVO-marine in Sebastopol zou aanmeren was nu niet langer ondenkbaar. Zeker in het licht van het feit dat de meest relevante posities na de staatsgreep in handen waren gekomen van anti-Russische Oekraïense nationalisten.
In late 2014, armed soldiers in uniforms without insignias began to occupy Crimea. Despite their Russian weapons and equipment, Russia denied involvement. Just 2 months after their appearance, Putin declared Crimea was now part of Russia. It marked the start of the Russo-Ukrainian War. So what led to Putin's invasion of Crimea in 2014? And why does Crimea continue to be a crucial sticking point in negotiations in 2023? To understand this in more detail, let's first take a look back at the complicated history of Ukraine and the Crimean Peninsula. Like most of Europe, Ukraine has had a shifting history territorially, and for centuries it has had a complex and antagonistic relationship with Russia. Incorporated into the Russian Empire in the late 18th century, Ukraine briefly gained its independence in 1918, but 3 years later became part of the Soviet Republic. Stalin's regime ruled the region aggressively, enacting a number of Russification tactics. The Holodomor was Stalin's state-sponsored famine of 1932-33, a genocide in Ukraine. It was a direct assault on Ukraine's peasantry, and nearly 4 million people died. In 1944, as part of Stalin's systematic repression of ethnic minorities, thousands of Crimean Tatars were deported en masse and exiled from Crimea. Khrushchev took power of the Soviet Union in 1953, and he had less of Stalin's anti-Ukrainian anxieties. In 1954, the Crimean Peninsula was ceremoniously transferred from the Russian SFSR to Ukraine. On the 1st of December 1991, a referendum on independence was held in Ukraine. The population voted overwhelmingly for independence. Geographically, the Crimean Peninsula in the Black Sea holds a location of great strategic importance. Since Ukraine's independence in 1991, Russia has held military bases on the peninsula, including the port of Sevastopol. Furthermore, Crimea is home to key energy supplies, including huge amounts of offshore oil and gas resources in the Black Sea. For years, Ukraine's government under Viktor Yanukovych tried to decrease the amount of energy that they were importing from Russia, particularly gas. Annexing Crimea allowed Russia to gain control of some of those vital energy assets. Alongside its geographical value, Putin undoubtedly saw the annexation of Crimea as a politically strategic move.
We zien dus dat de Krim een essentiële rol speelt voor de geopolitieke en strategische rol die Rusland heeft in dat gebied. Rusland moest er als de kippen bij zijn om het gebied in haar periferie te houden. Om haar warmwaterbasis niet te verliezen in de Zwarte Zee, moest er snel gehandeld worden. Ook de overwegend Russische bevolking die op de Krim leeft, wil absoluut niet onder het gezag van Kiev leven. Een regering waar fervent Russisch hatende personen zaten. Het gesprek dat onderschept werd van Timoshenko sprak boekdelen. Hoe men denkt in Kiev en vooral Lviv, het oude Lemberg, waar de Ruslandhaat diep gebakerd ligt in de cultuur.
On March 2nd, 2014, over 40 people were murdered in Odessa, Ukraine. Some eyewitnesses claim that the real number is over 100. Some of the victims were burned alive, others were strangled or beaten to death. A pregnant woman was among those killed. I'm not going to show the images of the dead bodies directly in this video because doing so would either get the video blocked or age restricted. In the description you'll find a link to a page where you can view those images and videos if you're so inclined. I warn you though, they are truly horrific and should not be viewed in front of children. Now the mainstream media and Western politicians have glossed over what happened that day. They've attempted to blur the chain of events and have completely avoided condemning those responsible. Instead, they've blamed the anti-Kiev protesters and Russia for the violence. But what about that video that showed the anti-Kiev protesters firing automatic weapons during the clash? You're probably thinking about this video. This is the video that the corporate media outlets broadcasted to the public, which shows what appears to be anti-Kiev protesters firing on Maidan protesters on May 2nd. Open and shut case, right? These guys brought this on themselves. If you just saw this clip, that would be the obvious conclusion. However, this isn't the only clip that we have. We have quite a bit of footage that the mainstream media isn't showing you, and that footage tells a very, very different story. Here's that same scene with the shooter videotaped from a different angle. Now pay close attention to the people he's with. The red armbands these guys are wearing are supposed to symbolize the anti-Kiev contingent. In particular, pay attention to this man in the brown jacket. Also take note of this padding that he's carrying in his right hand. This guy with the brown jacket is important, and you'll see why when we show you the next clip. This next clip I'm going to show you first at normal speed, then we're going to slow it down and freeze frames to point out important details.
Пострадал начальник милиции общественной безопасности Фучиджи. У него ранение в руку. Полковник Фучиджи с окровавленной рукой, ему оказывается помощь на месте.
Now, if we freeze this frame, the man in the back of the ambulance that invites the police officer to get in looks an awful lot like the shooter. But this is a very brief scene and the image isn't clear enough to hang a case on it. However, what we see next is very clear. Remember the man with the brown suit and the odd padding that was in the contingent that was firing on the protesters? Here he is again, helping a police officer get into that ambulance, carrying that masked man. Notice the men with red armbands with him. It turns out we have lots of images and footage tying the police to this provocation. The officer being escorted to the ambulance was photographed and videotaped from multiple angles. Witnesses have identified him as Colonel Fusheji. Here we see him and other police consulting with masked men who are presenting themselves as anti-Kiev protesters. Here we have an unidentified officer giving instructions to a group of these masked men. Why would the Ukrainian provisional government work with thugs presenting themselves as the opposition? Why would they stand by and allow these thugs to escalate the situation by firing into the crowd, and then flee the scene with them? Doesn't that strike you as a little bit odd? This is a very old tactic. The technical term, which has been in use since the 1870s, is agent provocateur. That's French for provoking agent. Authorities use agent provocateurs when they want to manufacture a justification for a crackdown against their opponents. And boy did they capitalize on that justification in Odessa. The Maidan protesters, which eyewitnesses say outnumbered the anti-Kiev protesters 10-1, headed straight for the opposition's campground. First, they burned down their tents. The anti-Kiev protesters tried to put up a defense at the door, but the Maidan crowd began throwing Molotov cocktails. Soon the building was engulfed in flames, but the Maidan people didn't stop. Here's what the scene looked like on the ground. You can hear the crowd cheering as they set the building ablaze. In the full version of the video, the Maidan can be seen beating those who try to escape. Here you can see a Maidan activist shooting at those trying to escape from the windows. There was a fire station less than a kilometer away, but they didn't intervene for hours. Why? Here's why. The Maidan crowd blockaded the fire truck and wouldn't let the firefighters operate. It's not unclear how the fire started, as the mainstream media has been trying to convince you. Nor is it unclear who started the fire. Here we see a group of Maidan girls doing their part by filling up Molotov cocktails behind the scenes while the boys are busy using them to burn people alive. This wasn't a tragic accident. This was murder. One of the official YouTube channels for the Maidan, Euromaidan PR, uploaded this video right after the blaze where they do a walkthrough of the building examining the corpses. They entitled it "Russian Terrorists Burned Alive in the Trade Union Building Fire in Odessa, Ukraine, May 2nd, 2014. They were proud of what they did, and they weren't the only ones. Following is a screenshot I took from a public post on Facebook made by the Ukrainian nationalist Irina Faryon, who publicly commended the murderers. All over the internet, self-proclaimed fascists were hailing this as a victory for the extreme right. A victory over who? There were no Russian citizens among the dead. They were all Ukrainians. I'm not going to show you the video that they uploaded. It's far too graphic. Again, you'll find a link in the description to watch it if you're so inclined. As horrific as the video is, it's a bit deceptive because it doesn't show the pregnant woman who was killed upstairs. Her body wasn't burned at all. She appeared to have been strangled to death. What's even more disturbing is that there was video taken from the ground which captured the audio of her screaming in her final moments. After the screaming stopped, Maidan activists presented themselves at the window, gleefully waving the Ukrainian flag. During all of this, the police were standing by and did nothing. There was no investigation. In fact, the provisional government in Kiev has blamed the anti-Kiev protesters for the fire and arrested the survivors. Apparently, these people burned themselves to death and strangled their own people. Right. Does this all seem out of place with the narrative you've been handed for months by the media and the politicians? You believed them when they told you that the accusations that the Maidan was run by neo-Nazis were just baseless conspiracy theories.
They had their orders. Bring back the authority of the Ukrainian government. Drive out the separatists backed by Russia. But in Kramatorsk, it didn't quite go according to plan. They got this far and no further. Their path was blocked. There was no way forward.
The people here say they will not let the Ukrainian soldiers pass. That's why they've linked arms here on the railway track. They say, look, they're pointing guns at us. In fact, the soldiers seem to be taking care not to adopt too aggressive a position because they know if they cause injury or worse, that will set the whole place on fire.
Who are you going to shoot? This man asked. The people? The soldiers didn't know what to do. One got out of his vehicle. Be quiet, he said. I'll call the commander and we'll discuss it. A few yards away, a white Opel saloon had been crushed by an armoured vehicle earlier. The police took an incident report as if it had been an everyday traffic accident. A helicopter circled overhead as the soldiers tried to work out what to do. Not everyone here wants a separate state or closer links with Russia.
It's crazy, quite crazy. We are peaceful people. We don't need all this. We want to live in peace, in Ukraine, one country.
My son is serving in the army. It shouldn't happen like this. It's wrong.
Eventually, the soldiers removed the magazines from their weapons to great acclaim.
What are you going to do? The people won't let you pass.
Что вы планируете дальше делать, ребята? Тут стоять или?
Я не собираюсь воевать.
I'm not going to war.
The government says you must take these towns back. Are you going to?
Я против всего этого.
I'm against all of this, everything that's happening.
A few miles away, armoured vehicles were proceeding north up the main road, flying the Russian flag. The very people the soldiers had been supposed to overcome had hijacked Ukrainian armour in another part of Kramatorsk. They drove through a pro-Russian checkpoint to great acclaim and into the town of Slovyansk, where they took the opportunity to show off their driving skills. The government in Kiev must be watching in horror as the pro-Russian armed men make a mockery of the fabled anti-terror operation to dislodge them. And then someone added a cuddly toy. The Ukrainian president says Moscow is exporting terrorism to eastern Ukraine. But the armed men who control Slavyansk, supported by Russia, are working on their public relations. No sign of the Ukrainian soldiers who'd been hijacked in their vehicle, so he asked one of the armed men.
Now they're deciding whether to come over to our side or not. They'll decide with their commander.
He spoke, I'm told, with a strong Russian accent. Today was a deep humiliation for the Ukrainian authorities and a boost for Moscow. Some people around here are calling it the Russian Spring.
Toch loopt dit wel uit de hand. Kiev gaat over tot een verharding van het conflict en begint met een brute burgeroorlog in het oosten van de Oekraïne. Een oorlog waar van 2014 tot aan februari 2022 toe meer dan 14.000 burgerdoden bij gaan vallen. Kiev wil met harde hand het gebied innemen en blijft maar troepen sturen. Zelfs in de westelijke regio's waren Oekraïners niet happig om dienst te nemen toen de dienstplicht na de afschaffing in 2013 in mei 2014 opnieuw werd ingevoerd.
Final training for the front line. One of these men was a gas worker less than 3 months ago. Now, he's about to fight Russia.
Міняй плечі.
Що відчуваю? How do I feel? How should I feel? Everything is okay. I feel like the guys need some help. That's why I'm here.
As Britain's army chief says the UK public needs to be ready for any future war, Ukraine offers an idea of what that means. It's unclear who among these men chose to sign up and who were caught in a growing conscription drive. But they seem willing to go forward, though their trainer says it's not just extra manpower that's required as the war drags on.
We need more weapons, ammunition, artillery, more rifles, machine guns.
Daarom beperkt het reguliere leger het tot artilleriebeschietingen, gradraketten en luchtbombardementen met gevechtsvliegtuigen, waarbij veel burgerslachtoffers vielen. De directe strijd werd overgelaten aan de paramilitaire bataljons. Deze milities waren gerecruiteerd uit gewapende eenheden van het Maidanplein, dus de Azov onder andere, militaire vrijwilligers en buitenlandse huurlingen, waaronder zelfs Georgiërs, Roemenen en fascisten uit met name Zweden en Duitsland. Evenals voormalige commando's uit Israël, blauwhelmen die actief waren geweest bij de Maidan-opstand. Ook bataljons van Tsjetsjeense ballingen vochten aan de zijde van Kiev. Kolomoisky was een van de belangrijkste financiers van deze eenheden. Hij had naar verluidt $10 miljoen uitgegeven om zijn eigen 2000 man sterke Dnipro 1 bataljon te creëren, genoemd naar de voetbalclub Dnipropetrovsk, de stad die inmiddels Dnipro heet. Plus een 20.000 man tellende reservemacht. Met de regelmaat worden er voor Kiev vechtende soldaten krijgsgevangenen gemaakt, die door de plaatselijke bevolking niet bepaald mild worden behandeld.
Captured Ukrainian servicemen have been taken to the scene of the bus stop attack in Donetsk and paraded before an angry crowd, firmly convinced that Kiev was behind the bloodshed. Wearing civilian clothes and visibly injured, the prisoners were taunted and hit by locals, their separatist guards doing little if nothing to shield them. Rebel leader Alexander Zakhachenko had urged residents to gather, promising them the opportunity to confront prisoners of war. With victims still lying where they died, civilians unleashed their fury at those they blame. As in other deadly episodes of Ukraine's conflict in which more than 5,000 people are thought to have died, the truth as to what happened here may never be known.
Een van die separatisten is kolonel Givi, Mikhail Tolsky, een Russische opstandeling die tegen het leger van Kiev strijdt. Givi overlijdt uiteindelijk in 2017 bij een raketaanval.
Как, это что такое? Черный дым пошел. Зеленый. Я принял. А мы пошли. Я в углу зеленки разрывы. Угу. Не, на растяжке. А ну пусть его поставьте. Не, вокруг, бегом. Где? Где? Пулемет его.
Принял! Утес еще выше. Заряжаем сразу. Давай! Повыше! И на 12 тонн!
Гонки уже люди, и все я всем показывают, что и вот вы слышите, в данный момент работает град по нам. Вы все слышали, все видели? Вот осколки по нам летят, смотрите, аккуратно голову берегите. Вот он. Горячий загаза. Вот осколки. Горячий, смотри, аккуратно. Да, да, вот тут еще. Вашу руку ждет. Да, осколки. Снимайте, смотрите. Мы не лжем.
Half augustus had het Oekraïense regime 23 van de oorspronkelijk 36 door opstandelingen bezette districten heroverd. Op 24 augustus echter interveneerden Russische speciale troepen om te voorkomen dat de opstandelingen werden verslagen en Donetsk in handen zou vallen van de nationalistische milities, wat een bloedbad zou hebben betekend. De 3.000 tot 4.000 sterke Russische troepenmacht bracht een zware nederlaag toe aan de troepen van Kiev. De Russische troepen waren eind augustus weer teruggetrokken, maar niet zonder een duidelijke boodschap af te geven. Moskou zou niet toestaan dat de opstandelingen militair werden verslagen, zonder een voorafgaand alomvattend akkoord van het soort waarover de onderhandelingen waren onderbroken door het neerhalen van de Maleisische boeiing. Op 26 augustus begonnen in Minsk op initiatief van de Wit-Russische president Lukashenko nieuwe onderhandelingen. En op 5 september 2014 werd in aanwezigheid van een vertegenwoordiger, de OVSE, het protocol van Minsk ondertekend tussen Kiev, vertegenwoordigd door Kuchma, Rusland en de vertegenwoordigers van de volksrepublieken Donetsk en Lugansk. Begin januari 2015 schonden de opstandelingen de wapenstilstand van Minsk door een militair offensief in de Donbass te lanceren om terreinverlies in de periode mei tot augustus 2014 goed te maken. De Oekraïnse strijdkrachten waren nog altijd in lappendeken van het lang verwaarloosde reguliere leger en de vrijwilligersbataljons van de Nationale Garde. Toen er weer een grote strijdmacht van Kiev dreigde te worden omsingeld en zelfs het risico liep helemaal te worden vernietigd, kwamen de Duitse kanselier Merkel en de Franse president François Hollande op 7 februari met een nieuw vredesplan. Minsk II, aangekondigd op de 12e, herhaalde de bepalingen van Minsk I, maar dit keer werden die ook onderschreven door Duitsland en Frankrijk. De akkoorden van Minsk erkenden weliswaar de verscheidenheid van religies, talen en culturen binnen Oekraïne met de bedoeling die in de grondwet te verankeren, maar wie zou die federale oplossing in praktijk brengen? Inmiddels, en daar komt hij, weten we op grond van uitspraken van Poroshenko en de ex-bondskanselier Merkel dat het nooit de bedoeling was. Het ging er slechts om tijd te winnen, om Kiev zijn leger te laten opbouwen.
Another former European leader, François Hollande, has confirmed that a critical peace agreement designed to end the conflict in Donbass 7 years ago was actually used to give Kiev more time to prepare for war against Russia.
Yes, Angela Merkel is right on this point. Since 2014, Ukraine has strengthened its military posture. It is the merit of the Minsk agreements to have given the Ukrainian army this opportunity. Thus, the time that Putin thought was an asset for him turned out to be, in fact, an opportunity for the Ukrainians.
7 years after the agreements were signed, 3 of the 4 leaders who participated in the peace deal have confirmed an ulterior purpose of their past intentions. The deal, approved by the UN Security Council back in 2015, was presented by the European leaders as the only option for sustaining peace and stability in Ukraine. But recently, the former German Chancellor and former Ukrainian President have admitted that the deal was actually meant from the very beginning to buy time for Kyiv to strengthen its military.
The 2014 Minsk agreement was an attempt to give Ukraine time. Ukraine used this time to become stronger, as you can see today. The Ukraine of 2014-2015 is not the Ukraine of today.
I needed the Minsk agreements to gain at least 4.5 years to build the Ukrainian forces, to build the Ukrainian economy, to train Ukrainian forces alongside NATO, to create the best armed forces in Eastern Europe according to NATO standards.
Despite those recent confessions, EU powers and Ukraine have previously accused Russia of violating the Minsk agreements. We heard from the founder of the news site Donbass Insider, who says the EU has lost any legitimacy for brokering peace between Russia and Ukraine after these latest revelations.
De populariteit van Poroshenko werd steeds minder en de door Poroshenko afgezette gouverneur van Dnipro, Kolomoisky, de tegenstander van Poroshenko, die was begonnen op een van zijn tv-kanalen met een tv-serie over een geschiedenisleraar die het tot president brengt. De hoofdrolspeler was de komiek Vladimir Zelensky. Mede met deze serie, de belofte om een einde te maken aan de burgeroorlog in het oosten en aan de corruptie van Poroshenko, werd Zelensky enorm populair en wist hij het zelfs om te zetten in een heuse verkiezingsoverwinning. Volgens het Poolse OSW, Eastern Studies Center, had Poroshenko met zijn holding International Investment Bank zijn vermogen verzesvoudigd tijdens zijn bestuur.
It's to Ukraine's presidential elections now, where a TV comedy star has opened a commanding lead in the first round, with over half of all ballots counted. Volodymyr Zelensky leads with at least 30% of the vote. The 41-year-old is the star of a popular comedy show and topped opinion polls prior to the vote. He's never held political office. Incumbent President Petro Poroshenko currently in second place with 17%. The former Prime Minister, Yulia Tymoshenko, is set to be knocked out of the running in third place. Let's take a closer look at an unlikely contender with a strong chance of becoming the country's next president.
Volodymyr Zelensky.
the comedian candidate joking at the ballot box, asking if he can cast more than one vote for the camera. Zelensky comes to the candidacy by way of a hit TV show called Servant of the People, where he plays an outsider elevated to the presidency. So does playing a president on TV teach you how to do it in real life? Supporters and analysts have different views.
I don't know if there is such a person as the protagonist in the series, but I'd like to believe in that.
Zelensky is new. He is not part of the system. He is against the system, and there are demands for change in this country.
Zelensky may not be entirely outside the system. Many say he's in the pocket of an oligarch who owns the TV channel Zelensky's program appears on, who opposes present President Petro Poroshenko.
People don't support Zelensky, they just want to show their attitude, negative attitude to Poroshenko.
Poroshenko is the president Ukrainians have now, the chocolate billionaire who rode his confectionery fortune to the presidency in the last election. To many, he represents everything that is wrong about Ukraine now, corruption and low living standards. He made his name as a pro-European, anti-Russian candidate, and he's sticking to it.
We have passed the test for our European ways, and it means everything we do to head in the European direction is absolutely right.
With an outsider comedian all but poised to become president, many Ukrainians do not seem to believe he's playing games with the country's future.
Om nog maar even te onderstrepen wie achter het succes van Zelensky zat, het volgende fragment dat zich handelt over Kolomoisky.
Ukrainian actor Volodymyr Zelensky has achieved fame portraying a president in this TV show, which is broadcast on a channel owned by a man backing his real-life presidential campaign. Billionaire Ihor Kolomoisky has provided security, lawyers and vehicles for Zelensky. His bodyguard accompanied Zelensky on the campaign trail. The car Zelensky uses belongs to a company owned by one of Kolomoisky's companies. And Kolomoisky's lawyer is now working for Zelensky's campaign. When the results of the first round of the election became clear on March 31st, President Petro Poroshenko did not mince his words.
Доля вже так розпорядилася, що звела мене в другому турі, і я не соромлюся це казати, звела мене з маріонеткою Коломойського.
Kolomoisky, filmed here in Switzerland in 2018, is an arch foe of Poroshenko and one of the richest men in Ukraine, with holdings in the metal, petroleum and media sectors. He set up Privatbank in the 1990s, which quickly grew to be one of the biggest financial institutions in Ukraine. But in 2016, Poroshenko's government seized control of Privatbank, claiming that billions of dollars were embezzled from it. Kolomoisky denies any wrongdoing and is fighting in court to get Privatbank back. RFERL recorded an off-camera interview with Zelensky about the issue.
Скажіть, чи підтримуєте ви компенсацію чи повернення Приватбанку для Ігоря Коломойського?
Та мені все одно, що буде з Ігорем Коломойським. Це повинні розбиратися.
Щодо Приватбанку.
Приватбанк зараз державна установа. Чому вона повинна повертатись Коломойському?
Kolomoisky has himself briefly held public office, becoming governor of his native Dnipropetrovsk region in 2014. It was shortly after mass protests toppled Ukraine's Kremlin-friendly president, Viktor Yanukovych.
Но раз мы идем в Европу, мы хотим, чтобы все реформы, которые должны произойти в стране, они должны соответствовать. Мы должны в результате этих реформ получить страну законодательной, административной базой, такая, как действует в европейских странах.
Within months, Kolomoisky was helping to finance volunteer units to fight against Russia-backed separatists who had seized control in nearby regions of eastern Ukraine. He was credited with helping to prevent them from advancing into his region, but critics suggested he was also building a private army. On March 19, 2015, armed men occupied the offices of a state-owned oil company in Kiev. Kolomoisky was involved in a struggle for influence at the company called Укртранснафта. When he emerged from the building, an RFERL journalist asked what he was doing there.
А что ты не спрашиваешь, как рейдерский захват в Укртранснафте произошел? И русские диверсанты сюда попали, а? Что ты об этом не спрашиваешь? Или тебя Коломойского, надо увидеть.
Days later, President Poroshenko dismissed him as governor after Kolomoisky offered to step down. Kolomoisky continued his business activities, later moving to Switzerland. Zelensky travelled to Geneva in February 2018 to attend Kolomoisky's birthday party. In April 2019, RFERL asked Kolomoisky about his ties with Zelensky.
По зустрічам з Зеленським, він у мене був на дні рождения в прошлом году в Женеві.
Це останній раз, коли ви особисто бачились?
Да, я думаю, да. Надо так, это самое, но, по-моему, да.
Окей.
Ну, если где-то, может, я уже не буду, я уже начинаю, вы когда так задаете вопросы, как следователь, так я начинаю ерзать. Но, может, где-то и пересекся, еще черт его знает.
But by checking flight records, RFERL discovered that after that birthday party, Zelensky flew to Geneva another 10 times. Furthermore, after Kolomoisky moved to Israel, Zelensky flew to Tel Aviv 3 times between October and December 2018. It's not clear if the two men met on these occasions. They both insist their relationship is professional and based on Zelensky's TV work. The aspiring politician says it's not political.
Kort na Zelensky's verkiezingsoverwinning in 2019 verklaarde Kolomoisky dat er toenadering tot Rusland moest worden gezocht. Maar de oligarch gaf ook aan bij wie hij verzet zou verwachten bij deze toenadering. Dat zou namelijk Washington zijn. Washington, de NAVO en de ultras in de Oekraïne zelf zouden het laatste woord hebben. In februari 2021 werd met instemming van de Amerikaanse ambassade in Kiev 3 tv-kanalen wegens het verspreiden van Russische propaganda gesloten. Daarna in april nog 2, waaronder kanaal 5 van Poroshenko. Een maand later liet de nieuwe president Zelensky Viktor Medvedchuk arresteren, die ooit kabinetchef was voor de eerdere president Oekrai. Medvedchuk was een aanhanger van toenadering tot Rusland en een vriend van Poetin. De opbouw van de Oekraïnse strijdkrachten met behulp van de NAVO ging onverminderd door.
Even though the training is 12 hours a day, they still want to learn more, get some more experience, because the stakes for them are very high.
I'm a soldier and they are our brothers in need. So we try to do as much as possible to help them.
Even though the training is 12 hours a day, they still want to learn more, get some more experience, work a bit more around the tank. They have questions all the time because the stakes for them are very high.
What's important, we are not alone as Polish instructors. That's absolutely added value, because this is an international effort for training of the Ukrainian soldiers.
Dit als middel om Moskou tot militair ingrijpen te provoceren, maar meer daarover in het volgende deel, als we daadwerkelijk de inval van Rusland gaan behandelen. Zoals eerder gezegd verklaarde Poroshenko achteraf dat de Minsk-akkoorden betreffende de autonomie voor de Donbass en Lugansk in respectievelijk september 2014 en februari 2015 slechts hadden gediend om tijd te winnen voor het leger, om zich te versterken. Zo werd het oefenterrein bij Lviv een verkapte NAVO-basis en werden militaire adviseurs van diverse NAVO-landen er gestationeerd op Oekraïns grondgebied. Dit was deel 3. In het volgende deel gaan we het ingrijpen van Rusland behandelen.